Hello, good morning, everyone. Can I be heard? Okay. So, um, maybe we could start na kahit na hindi pa nakakarating karamihan, but they're all coming in naman. Okay, so for today, we will be discussing geriatric psychiatry. And this is a topic na we give to third-year medical students since the majority of the topics should have been, I mean, the disorders in geriatric psychiatry should have been discussed already, and we will just be stating ano yung mas mga madaling gawin for you to be able to assess these disorders in the geriatric population, as well as other things to consider when we have geriatric psychiatry. So these are the objectives for this lecture. We will first discuss some epidemiology regarding old age and the landscape of our patients when it comes to old age, as well as talk about frailty, the concept of frailty and biological age. Also, we will go through common psychiatric diagnosis, and we will be differentiating their clinical presentations from those of the younger population, as well as treatment principles. And we would be emphasizing more on the non-pharmacologic management for geriatric. Okay. Okay. So, geriatric psychiatry is actually a subspecialty of psychiatry. In the Philippines, we still don't have a training of for geriatric psychiatry, but we only have, I think, around five specialists in geriatric psychiatry, and they study abroad for them to be able to be called geriatric psychiatrists. And this is a subspecialty that focuses on the prevention, evaluation, diagnosis, and treatment of mental and emotional disorders in older adults. And when we say older adults, there is actually a categorization between the ages. So we have the young old, which are the 65 to 74 years old. Usually at this day and age, most of them are still healthy and active. However, the old 75 to 84 years old, they could be experiencing some health problems and difficulties with managing their daily activities. And the oldest old, these are the ones who are really frail already and would really need someone to care for them. Para kang, when I talk to my patients, I tell them parang may baby na ulit sila. It's just that it's an old person instead of a very young person. So most of the time, people who are aged greater than 85 years old would be needing the assistance to do so many things like getting out of bed, the daily activities, eating, kailangan subuan na, thinking about their medications. So most of the time, it creates a very um, difficult time also for the family since they have to assign someone who would really watch over their elderly loved ones. But if, even based on age, we still have to delineate the chronological age, which is usually just the number of years since birth, and this is measured in calendar time. However, when we talk about biological age, this would be regarding the functionality or the physiological state of the body, and it would reflect how well cells, tissues, and organs are aging. So you could have a chronological age of 70 years old, but still have a biological age of a 50-year-old, meaning a lot of deficits are not yet there. Sometimes biological age is also determined by our genetics. So there are people who get dementia very early on compared to other people. So that would have an impact on their biological age compared to their chronological age. Um, in the Philippines, the life expectancy have grown since, not so much, but you will see this much mas maganda when you look at the world data. But I could not find a very clear picture of the world data when it comes to life expectancy. But in the past years, we only have 72 years old, 72.3 years old for females, and 66.11 life expectancy for males. And however, if you notice here, there was a dip in 2021, and this is because of the pandemic. So most of our elderly patients had difficulty to cope with that time, and bumaba ulit yung life expectancy natin. However, currently in 2023, we could already see again this life expectancy rising up. Okay? And when we compare it to the population in general, so in 2016, um, people who are aged greater than 65 would compose of 3.8% of our population. However, in 2026, this has increased to 5.8%, and in the future, in 2036, it would remain increasing at 8%. So if you notice with this study on population, the younger individuals are getting smaller. However, the older population are getting bigger. And this would have an impact in terms of our future as physicians. So right now you are in third year medical school. You still have a year in sorry, clerkship, and then for another year for internship, and then board exams, and you would still be training for residency that would make you graduate by, let's say, 2036, and you would notice that there's already a big change within the population composition regarding to the age range. And maybe when you graduate, there will be more old people that you would be catering to, or elderly people that you would be catering into. So you might want to take a bit of specialty that would also um, take, take elderly people into consideration. So, and when we talk about the aging population, we have to talk about frailty as well. So, frailty is a clinical recognizable state of increased vulnerability resulting from age-related decline across multiple physiological systems. So you could have a biological driven frailty, which is based on physical signs like weight loss, your exhaustion, the weakness of the person. You will also note that there would be slow walking or speed or decline in the physical activity of the person. And however, what's more important in psychiatry, although they are still correlated, would be the deficit driven frailty, and this is based on the accumulation of deficits like comorbidities, um, disabilities, and lab abnormalities. And this may also include psychological and cognitive frailty, which are mostly the chief complaints while patients are being brought to us um, for consultations in psychiatry. So the impact of this frailty in mental health is that later on, with the increase in the population of the elderly, there would also be larger pool of patients with age-related psychiatric conditions, and psychiatric care must be able to adapt to complex cases where mental health interacts with physical decline. We will be dealing more with polypharmacy and disabilities, and also our adults face retirement, bereavement, social isolation, and role changes, which could also affect their mental health. Um, we know that right now we are trying to build what we want to become when we are older. However, if you reach the age of 60, maybe that time, or 65, maybe you will not be the best surgeon that time. Your skills would also decline. Maybe you would not be the best cardiologist, but and sometimes these titles would have an effect on us pag natanggal na siya. And also work Like if you could operate on 10 patients a day, when you reach 70s, I don't think you could do that anymore. Okay, so this have a big impact for people who are aging as well, because a lot of it could be could be viewed as losses in their lives. Also, their friends, their family members, they're also um nawawala na din. So the social isolation becomes more prominent at this age as well. Okay, so when it comes to longer lives, also this raise questions about the quality of life, autonomy, and dignity. Remember that when we talked about frailty, so it's an accumulation of things, um, that deficits that are accumulated over time, and because of that, sometimes you might question your own autonomy and dignity. So mental health care plays a central role in ensuring older adults age with meaning, resilience, and support. Now let's go to the common psychiatric disorders that we see in the clinics for elderly patients. So depression would account to 5.7% to 15%, anxiety is around 3 to 10%, delirium is 30%, and dementia would be 7 to 8%. However, there are some differences in the presentation, especially with depression and anxiety, because these two you could also see it very uh, a lot. I'm sorry, you could also see it a lot in the normal, not normal, but younger age population. But delirium and dementia, we usually see this in the elderly. Okay. So when it comes to depression, there are several differences from the presenting factors of the younger adults compared to the elderly. So with mood symptoms, you will notice that in younger adults, there's the classic sadness, there's feeling of hopelessness or guilt, but in the elderly patients, we see less overt sadness. So it's not overt sadness, but overt sadness, and may present, however, as irritability, apathy, or withdrawal. Okay. When it comes to the somatic symptoms, we usually see difficulty sleeping, appetite changes, and fatigue in the younger population. But in the elderly, there is more pronounced somatic complaints, such as, let's say, laging masakit yung tiyan, laging masakit yung likod, and they would not say that this is because I'm sad, but they would just be complaining of a lot of things that they're feeling. Okay, and again, this could be mistaken for medical illness, and because of this, the depression is not being addressed appropriately. Uh, with the cognitive symptoms for younger adults, it's mostly difficulty concentrating and indecisiveness. However, for the elderly, you would already be noticing prominent cognitive impairment and slow thinking, and they would often complain of memory complaints. So, hindi na nila maalala anong araw ngayon. But if you ask a depressed person who is in the younger population, alam pa din naman nila. Okay? In the psychosexual context, their triggers are also different. So mostly for younger adults, it would be work stress, um, educational stress, relationship issues, and identity struggles. However, depression for the elderly could be triggered by losses in the family or friends, social isolation, reduced independence. So losses could also be when I mentioned this earlier, your work. So when you go into retirement, sometimes it would be hard to adjust from someone who goes to work every day, to someone who stays at home most of the time, and that could also be perceived as a loss of ability to have income or some other things. Okay? Suicidality is usually linked to hopelessness and impulsivity in the younger adults. However, in the elderly, usually this is triggered or more prominent when there is chronic illnesses, or they have this perceived um, notion that they are being a burden to others, and also they use, or because of the method of suicide, they would have higher lethality compared to other younger adults because, of course, their body could not cope as much as they can when they were younger. Okay, so in the elderly, the suicide concerns is that it's more prevalent in the elderly compared to younger people. Okay. Now, how do we assess depression in the elderly? We usually use this scale. It's called Geriatric Depression Scale, or GDS. And if you or your loved one, or you notice, sorry, hindi pa kayo, but maybe a loved one of yours who's in the geriatric population you suspect would have depression, you could already use this. So if they answer yes to five or more questions, and then this would suggest depression. And if you want, you could look for someone to help your loved one with that depression, or go into psychotherapy as well. Okay. When it comes to anxiety in the elderly, the triggers are also different. So again, with younger adults, almost the same with depression. It's work stress, relationships, finances, and identity struggles. However, for the elderly, triggering factors could include health concerns, fear of dependency, bereavement, cognitive decline, and social isolation. The presentation, I'm so sorry for all the typographical errors. So it could be excessive worrying, restlessness, irritability, and panic attacks. But again, in the elderly, it would be more of the somatic complaints. So they would be complaining of dizziness, gastric upset, and sleep disturbance. When it comes to cognitive features, so the younger adults would have more rumination, catastrophic thinking, difficulty concentrating, while elderly would worry more of yung safety nila, who would take care of them in the future, paano pag nawala sila, more of those things compared to the cognitive features or the ruminations of the younger adults. Okay, so yeah. That sorry for anxiety and the elderly, assessment is still the same. So we could use yung HAM-D natin. Oh, sorry, HAM-A, yung Hamilton anxiety scale that we use also for the younger adults. Okay, but most of the time, they would have the same scores naman for people who are in the younger population taking that exam, and the ones in the elderly population. So the next would be delirium, which is very common in patients who are hospitalized. So around 50% of hospitalized patients over the age of 65 could have had delirium. However, 60% of these cases were unrecognized by their physician. And when we say delirium, this is an acute confusional state and often occurs after acute illness or hospitalization. Most of the time, this is characterized by problems with the sensory and consciousness of the person. But in some cases, we could also see patients who would have hallucinations and perceptual disturbances. And there are some differentiating factors. So in the elderly, when you go into clerkship, you would notice that some elderly patients would complain that there are small children running around their room in the hospital. But we actually see that as what we call Lilliputian hallucinations from yung Gulliver's Travels, diba? The land of Lilliput. So there are small people. So they mistake some of the stimuli as little people, and sometimes this makes us a good horror story in the hospital, pero yun pala, the patient is having is delirious actually. Okay? So there may also be changes in mood and affect or day and night reversal, and the whole clinical picture tends to fluctuate over hours or days. So in the morning, the patient seems to be oriented, but in the afternoon, hindi niya na naman alam kung nasan siya. So that's a common feature of delirium. Okay, but again, the most salient feature is the dysfunction in attention span or concentration. Okay. So there are predisposing factors that would lead to delirium. One is of old age, dementia, the illness is severe, there are a lot of comorbidities, there is history of alcoholism, there's visual impairment and hearing impairment. So imagine if you're an elderly, hindi ka na makakita, hindi ka pa makarinig, pero there's a lot of things that's happening in the hospital when you're admitted. So sometimes, again, they interpret the stimulus as different things. So maybe a curtain to them would appear like um, someone who's there's a ghost or there's someone being there, a person who's watching over them. Okay. Also with hearing impairment, maybe yung yung mechanical ventilator na tumunog, they would interpret it as hinuhuli sila ng police or there's a fire near the building and that would cause a lot of delirious responses. Okay? However, precipitating factors or mainly these are also the causes would be if there's polypharmacy or drugs. So the mnemonic is still delirium. So drugs, electrolytes, lungs. So if the patient is hypoxic for whatever reason, maybe because of the infection that got into the lungs, so causing hypoxia or any infection itself, there could also be urinary retention or any intracranial problems like increased intracranial pressure or there's a mass there, then there's it could cause delirium. Also, unfamiliarity with the place, like hindi sila sanay na nasa hospital sila. Remember, one of the things would be the visual cues around us. So sometimes elderly people could not say if it's morning or night because they are unfamiliar with the place. It's like watching a movie the middle of the day or in the afternoon. And then when you go out of the mall, it's already dark. Para kang ma-disorient for a while na, oh, gabi na pala. And that happens also in the hospital because very konti lang yung mga windows or no one's there to really tell them na umaga na, gabi na, and they're just staying in their bed for long periods of time. Okay. And then lastly would be metabolic or endocrine, okay, problems. Okay. So there's what we call yung sa delirium assessment, yung ultra brief delirium screen, and you could do this bedside. And I want you to learn this kasi ito na yung pinakamadali na pwede natin gawin and it's quick. When you are already practicing physicians, this is easily done. So number one, you just sorry about the noise. You just have to ask two questions. Okay. So one is please tell me the day of the week, and the second week is second question, sorry, is please tell me the months of the year backward. Say December as your first month. Okay. So please tell me the day of the week, and if you're able to do that, please tell me the months of the year backwards, and starting with December as your first month. And how do we grade this ultra brief delirium screening? You have to ask the day of the week, so the participant not ask anyone. So pag na-check niya and she says, oh, it's a Monday today, then that's already 1 point kung hindi niya pa alam. When you recite the month backwards, so if there's a missed month, if the participant finished reciting months but missed one or more months, then it is incorrect. And if the patient is stuck, you could prompt them up to 2 times only. Pero pag hindi na, that's considered as a wrong answer. And if the participants begin at November or starts forward or begins spelling, read the question again only once. Pag di niya nagawa, it's already 0 point. Okay? So a mistake in one of these two questions would already give you an idea that the patient is having delirium or is suffering from delirium, and you have to move on to the next more specific testing, which is confusion assessment method. So this is answered by physicians based on their observations, and there you could identify if the patient is really delirious. Okay. Now, the management for delirium would actually depend on the cause of the delirium, and that's the first thing that you have to do. You have to find the cause and treat the cause. The second would be supportive care. So every morning you have to orient your patient by greeting them, good morning, kamusta po ang lunes ninyo, or something like that. Okay, you could also train them mobility, so referral to rehab medicine for them to be able to move around for a bit, hydration and sensory aids. So yeah, when you do the ultra brief assessment, sorry, I forgot to tell you that you have to allow them to wear yung mga hearing aids nila. They could wear eyeglasses kasi those are not part of the sensorium, but it helps them remember or recall things or be oriented as well. So you have to give those things to them. Okay? Sometimes there's a consult with dementia, yun pala walang hearing aid si tatay. So makulit talaga siya because he kept on asking. Yun pala, hindi lang niya marinig yung sinasagot sa kanya. Okay? Antipsychotics are reserved only when necessary, and we try our best to really avoid sedatives when it comes to the management of delirium. Okay? Okay. What about dementia? So, dementia is described as a generally progressive and irreversible impairment of the intellect, the prevalence of which increases with age. And this is, excuse me, as a result of decrease in acetylcholine. So at age 65, 5% of the population would already have dementia. However, at age 85 years old, 20% of the population, would already have severe dementia. So age is actually the most predictive factor of dementia. Okay. So in dementia, you would notice the changes in cognition such as memory, language, and visual spatial functioning. There could also be behavioral changes such as agitation, restlessness, wandering, so yung lumalabas ng madaling araw, tapos hindi na sila makakabalik, rage, violence, shouting, social and sexual disinhibition, and sleep disturbances. Sometimes our patients would be brought to us because of the change of the behavioral changes. Pero in Filipino culture kasi pinagbibigyan nila pag may memory loss or yung language, hindi na masyadong nakaka-name ng pangalan. Parang sinasabi nila that's normal for aging. However, once the patient would have, let's say, sexual disinhibition, yan, idadala na siya sa psychiatrist. Yun pala, if you look at the history, there's already a history of memory loss for the past 5 years. Okay, so the reason why they're being brought for geriatric psychiatry is more of the behavioral changes compared to the cognitive changes in the patient. Okay. So there are several risk factors for dementia, and there is what we call the uncontrollable, and the controllable. So the uncontrollable factors would include the age, your genetics, if you have trisomy 21 or Down syndrome, female gender. So there are more female patients who suffer dementia compared to males, or if there is a history of traumatic brain injury. For the controllable part, meaning that we could have prevented a bit, or prevented, the occurrence of dementia would be because of the following. So there's cardiovascular and endocrine diseases, and hearing impairment. I'm just a bit confused by the two because some studies would say that it's the control of the hypertension that prevents dementia the most. However, there are also some studies who would say that the hearing impairment or the treatment of the hearing impairment would prevent dementia the most. Wala pa akong nabasang journal regarding which is which talaga, but we put it in the controllable factor since pwede naman tong ayusin na dalawa. Okay? Also, physical activity. So, if you have better physical activity as a younger person, you have less risk for dementia. If you have higher social isolation, however, you have higher risk for dementia. And also, smoking and alcohol use would give you a higher risk for developing dementia later on in life. Okay. So there are several types of dementia. Marami siya, but these are the most common types which are being brought to psychiatric consult. So the most common is Alzheimer's dementia, and this is caused by amyloid plaques in the brain. With this type of dementia, you would notice that it is the memory loss that is the most predominant symptom. So even prior, the complaint would be memory loss, or I mean not prior, but at the early stages of the disease, it would be memory loss yung complaint. However, if we move to frontotemporal dementia, and the etiology is different from amyloid plaques. For frontotemporal dementia, it's tau protein dysfunction. If you have this, it would be the behavioral and language changes that would occur first. So sometimes patients would present with symptoms of OCD, so obsessive compulsive. So I had a patient before, linis ng linis, palit ng bedsheet, and then I noticed that the verbal output also diminishes. So she calls everything house, like we there was a flower beside her and she calls it house, and the kind of biscuit she calls it house also. So nanonotice natin na yung behavioral changes would also come with the language problems. And yeah, after MRI, it's actually frontotemporal dementia. Okay? Before pa dumating yung memory loss talaga. The next would be Lewy body dementia. This one, it would appear first as visual hallucinations and problems with REM sleep before the memory loss. And the last time, which is I think also very common, yung vascular dementia. So the presenting symptoms would include problems with attention, concentration, and executive dysfunction. So vascular dementia is caused by repeated ischemic brain injuries. So and you would notice that this is a bit of a stepwise pattern. So for example, there was a stroke prior, medyo nagkaroon ng memory loss or attention deficit. However, pag na-stroke again, mas pangit na naman yung concentration, memory, and you will notice that every time the person would have a stroke, pumapangit, or if they are not treating yung hypertension nila, then it causes further and further disabilities or problems with memory. Okay? So, but most of the time we still see Alzheimer's dementia. Okay. So again, another bedside test that you could do when you're suspecting dementia is the mini cog exam. So it would just consist of 3 steps. So one is 3-word registration, second is clock drawing, and the third is the 3-word recall. So this will be our script for doing the mini cog exam. So number 1 is you ask the patient, please listen carefully. I am going to say 3 words that I want you to repeat back to me now and try to remember. These words are banana, sunrise, chair. Can you guys repeat that for me and see if you are able to do it? Okay. And then next, I want you to draw a clock for me. First, put the number where they go. And now, after they're done placing the numbers where they go, you have to set the hands on test 10 past 11. Okay. Try to test yourself if you're able to do this. Okay. Okay. And then lastly, you have to ask them again, what were the 3 words that I asked you to remember? Okay. So this is an example of the clock drawing. So the one on your right is person who has dementia, an 80-year-old patient of mine who has been having memory loss for the longest period, pero recently lang siya ginawa. So if you look at it, they're not able to put the numbers on time, I mean on their places, and also they had difficulty throwing the hands already. Okay? And this is someone on your left, someone who is healthy and does not have dementia, and they will notice it. Okay? So, how do we score the mini-cog exam? So, number one, pag ni-repeat nila yung 3 words that you're able to say, then no score naman binibigay. For number 2, the clock drawing exam, the score is 0 to 2. So, 0 if the numbers are wrong or they did not answer or they did not make a clock. Number 2 is all numbers are in place. You could give the score of 2 if all the numbers are in place, especially numbers 12, 3, 6, 9 are in their anchor positions and hands are pointing to 11 and 2. Going back to this example, so diba pag 10 past 11, we would put the short hand pointing to 11 and the longer hand to 2. However, with this test, the length of the hands does not matter. Okay, basta nakaturo siya sa 11 and 2, then you would give 2 points for your patient. Okay? Okay. 0 to 3, so you give 1 point for every recalled word. So were you able to recall the 3 words I said earlier? If you were able to do so, then ayos pa tayo sa cognition. So the mini-cog exam, if you get less than 4, would need further assessment for dementia. Kung mas lenient ka, then it should be less than 3 lang. Pero pag if you're really hindi mo mapiga talaga in other terms, less than 4, you could already try to suspect for dementia already. Okay? So, if you're not able to, I'm sorry, what was I saying? I forgot. Oh yeah, sorry. So if there's less than 4 and needs further assessment, then the next exam or next test that you have to do would be the MOCA testing. I'm sure uh you've seen that before, yung MOCA test in neuro and in psychiatry. Okay. Okay. What about pseudodementia? So let's study this case for a while. So Mrs. L, a 72-year-old retired teacher, is brought to the clinic by her daughter due to the increasing forgetfulness and difficulty managing household tasks. Mrs. L reports that she can't remember anything anymore and often misplaces items. So she appears withdrawn with slowed speech and poor eye contact. And on examination, she struggles with concentration and gives up quickly on memory tests, saying, I don't know, rather than attempting answers. Unlike typical dementia, her cognitive lapses fluctuate and improve with encouragement. And her daughter notes that Mrs. L has lost interest in hobbies, sleeps poorly, and has been expressing feelings of hopelessness since her husband's death 6 months ago. Okay. So in psychiatry, we have this diagnosis called pseudodementia. It is when depressed patients or elderly patients would present with symptoms of dementia like memory loss. Okay. However, we have to differentiate it using the following observations. So usually people who have real dementia versus those who have pseudodementia, the onset of memory loss is gradual for those with dementia. However, those who are depressed and most likely having pseudodementia, the memory loss is abrupt. Okay? Memory testing, so patient attempts to answer. For patients who have dementia, you would see them frustrated if they could not remember the things that you mentioned to them earlier. So they would say, banana, ano nga ba yun? Sapatos po ba yun? Or something. So there's attempt to answer. However, if the person is depressed, ayaw na lang nilang sagutin. Hindi ko na po maalala talaga, Doc. That's what they tell you. So there's just giving up easily. Okay? For orientation, most of the time, patients who have dementia would be disoriented to time, place, and person. However, pseudo-dementia, they are oriented to time, place, and person. And when it comes to reversibility, of course, dementia or the cognitive dysfunctions caused by dementia is irreversible. However, for depression, it's reversible. So sometimes, if you're working on, let's say, having them to memorize things, if you urge them to do it, like, ano, yung una ganito, and they would still be able to answer it, then maybe it's more of pseudo dementia caused by depression compared to a real dementia. Okay? All right. So, what are the things that we consider when it comes to the treatment of patients in the geriatric population? Well, first, it's polypharmacy. So, taking polypharmacy is defined as taking five or more medications regularly, and it is especially common in older adults with multimorbidity. Um, Polypharmacy can be appropriate when clinically justified. So, for example, you're giving something for the heart and then giving something for the hypertension, if they are really working to enhance the effect of the medication, then it's very good. However, if not necessary or duplicative or harmful, then polypharmacy is a bad thing. So when we look at polypharmacy, we have to consider both the pharmacokinetics and the pharmacodynamics of each of the medicine that the patient is taking. Okay. However, in geriatric psychopharmacology, there needs to be more conscious effort in understanding the medications because of the differences in the symptom pattern, the diagnostic criteria, and of course the treatment response of the patients in the geriatric population. So what do we consider when we prescribe medications? So you have to collect a complete medication list and history. You do not prescribe a drug before you have a diagnosis. You review medications frequently. Know the drugs that you prescribe, including possible side effects and drug-drug interaction. And as a rule of thumb, you have to start your medication slow and titrate upwards as needed. Do not start the patient on two new drugs at the same time. Kung kaya lang ng isang gamot, isa lang muna. Up-titrate to a therapeutic dose before switching. So if let's say you start an antidepressant, let's say escitalopram at 5 milligrams, and then 2 weeks have passed, but the patient's still depressed, still anxious, instead of switching, let's try mirtazapine na lang. So you might want to increase the dose to reach the therapeutic dose first before the switching to another medication. Okay, and you have to consider non-pharmacologic management first. You have to educate your patient and their caregivers regarding the medication. And if meron, consider one drug to address two problems. So let's say depression and sad mood and difficulty sleeping, or let's say agitation and difficulty sleeping. Might as well give something na the patient would be able to sleep and at the same time would decrease the agitation, or maybe agitated due to hallucinations, then you have to give something that would target the hallucinations and the difficulty of sleeping as well. Okay. So non-pharmacologic treatments are more important in the geriatric population since pag nagdagdag ka pa ng gamot, they're already wide list of or long list of medications, then it might have an impact also. So we consider environmental modification for patients who have dementia and delirium. So we try to reduce overstimulation. You improve lighting so they could differentiate the morning from night. Um, so you give them windows so they could look outside and see, umaga pa pala. You ensure safe mobility. So if they could hold on to something and they're able to move, that's better. Create familiar surroundings so they don't get confused easily. And also you have to have a routine or structure during the day. So you could give them consistent daily schedules to help reduce anxiety, agitation, and confusion. So if they know na in the morning I would walk, then alam na nila na paggabi it's time to sleep. Okay? It's like also rearranging their body clocks. Okay? Psychosocial support, encourage social engagement, family involvement, and group activities to combat isolation. And we try to optimize their physical health by promoting sleep hygiene. Nutrition also is very important in the elderly. So I've seen a lot of patients na nanghihina, yun pala, they were not properly they're not getting proper nutrition. So, kasi mahina ng kumain, yung pustiso pala masakit. So, we could give yung mga milk supplements or change the diet pattern, biniblender na lang yung kakainin and to keep them more nourished and maintain nutrition. Exercise is also very important and of course management of sensory impairments. So if you're suspecting of dementia or psychosis in the elderly, please ensure that maganda yung visual nila or yung hearing nila, hindi masyadong nakaka-affect doon sa problems with psychiatric concerns. Or caregiver education is also very important. So we have to train the caregivers in communication strategies, stress management, and recognize early signs of distress. So communication strategies, ano ba yung mas naririnig ng mas matanda? Is it the high-pitched voice or the lower-pitched voice? So mas they're able to hear the low-pitched voice more compared to higher pitch voice. Okay? And also, if you could, you have to talk slowly to makahabol sila cognitively. So those are the things that you could tell your the caregivers para they could communicate better with the patients. Okay. So what about memory exercises? So memory exercises, very good also for cognitive stimulation. So reminiscence therapy, this is when you go to your lola and ask her sino yung mga exes niya. So that's a good training for memory kasi naaalala nila so they could remember. And that's reminiscence therapy. Okay? And orientation cues to maintain function, just like what I've said earlier. You say good morning, you say good afternoon, and you say good night. So they could be oriented to the time of the day. We could also put a lot of like the big calendars, the big numbers ng calendar, so they would be able to see the month and the year and the date of every morning. Okay, so behavioral strategies, you could identify triggers for agitation or depression and use redirection or reassurance or calming techniques. I think I've already said caregiver education earlier. And lastly, ethical emphasis. So you have to, as much as you can, uphold the dignity, autonomy, and minimize the use of restraints in the patients. Okay? So I think that's my last slide. And here are my references for this lecture. Please let me know if you have any questions. Questions? Mukhang wala. Okay. So the lecture has been uploaded to Canvas already. I'm not sure yet how many items will be